Hello, WellBetic community. It's Dr. Marisol. Welcome to WellBetic's Wellness Suites. Joining us today is a good friend of mine and colleague, Nathan, who is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at around 12, 13 years of age. And Nathan is here to share his story, and we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of education with diabetes. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Nate. It's
Thank
always a
you,
pleasure to
thank
see
you,
you.
thank you for having me. We don't always get to see each other in the office setting,
We do
so to be
not.
invited to your home and have this wonderful, candid conversation,
Yes,
I'm pretty excited. One of the first
absolutely.
few. So when you become huge and famous, don't forget me.
I will not. I will not.
I
You'll
helped
be
you get
part of
your
the
start.
team.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
thank
Okay.
you.
All right. All
Thank
right.
you.
Fair enough. Um,
So Nathan, let's start with you just sharing your story with our WellBetic community and our audience, because I'm sure that they are very curious as to what your journey has been living with diabetes.
Absolutely. And I think I've been asked this question many times, and I think everyone's journey is so intimate, right, to them. So for me, going back and use my aged brain here to think back 31 years to my diagnosis, was actually on a high note. We were traveling for vacation, my family and I, and it was the first time I'd ever been on an airplane.
Oh, wow.
So to step back a second, my parents had some inkling that something was not right. I had lost a significant amount of weight. I, was exhibiting the three P's, if we all know what that is, right? Polyuria, polyphagia, polydipsia. I was hungry all the time, thirsty all the time, and frequent urination. So,
That was a nice way to say it.
right, I'm trying to keep it PG rated for
PG,
this. Yeah,
yes.
we'll get a little R later, but so I was experiencing all the symptoms, but they all really had a story, right? And I was puberty, right, and getting more involved in sports at school and exercise, and it's the summer. We're talking August now, right? So everything had a story. Drinking more, well, it's hot out, and I'm exercising, and I'm doing sports, so I'm drinking more. Well, I'm drinking more, so I'm peeing more, and I'm always hungry. Well, there's puberty, and I'm growing, right? So
Lots of justifications, which
a
is what
ton.
happens.
Everything had a justification. Everything
Yes.
had a sound reasoning for it.
Mhm.
But things just weren't. My parents could tell there were just some things that weren't right. And as I think back, some things that I thought, maybe at the time weren't weird, but knowing now, obviously dealing with patients and having, a lot of people that we talk to that have exhibited these signs and symptoms. One of them was I would get frequently in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I would be so incredibly parched and thirsty that I would fill the sink, the bathroom, with water, plug it up, and just fill it with cold water and just drink out of it, like an animal, right? And but I would just think, okay, well, it was outside all day, it's hot, we didn't have air conditioner, so it was warm. So everything again had a good reason. So fast forward, we're traveling to Texas, visiting some friends and family, and first time on an airplane,
Mhm.
and I kept consistently just hitting that stewardess bell for something to drink. And my parents, of course, they had a story. Well, you're on an airplane, it's dry air and it's hot and
Sure.
summertime. So I kept asking the stewardess for things like orange juice
Of
and
course.
Coke and
Yes.
sodas and things like that and snacks. And so, long story short, we ended up landing at the airport, met up with our friends, and my parents in the background over the course of the next week or so were talking to our friends who were there to visit, and basically like, hey, these are some of the things Nathan has been exhibiting. We're going to have him checked out from the pediatrician when we get home. She's like, okay, well, her husband was type 1.
Okay.
She's a nurse. So
Okay.
she's like, I think she was a little bit more in tune to these signs and symptoms. And she's like, well, I'll test his blood sugar.
Right, right, right,
So she whips
right.
out her, John's finger stick machine. And back then, I think it was like 3 minutes to get a reading, right?
Like
In
a
a
few
day.
seconds nowadays.
Yeah, now it's
Yes.
seconds, instant. So I'm waiting, and a number popped up. I didn't know what these numbers meant. I'm 12, 13 years old.
Right.
And she's like, it's 454. And I'm like, cool. Is that good? Is that like, did I win? And she's like, that's pretty high. Rechecked it.
Mhm.
And again, it was still high. So my parents made a phone call to our pediatrician back home. At the time, was in Glastonbury, And he's like, why don't you bring him to the ER? He was a little concerned based on the history and what my parents told him, and went to the ER. Thankfully, I wasn't in DKA, but blood sugar was still presenting pretty high. So they, at the time, just gave me, I think at the time, it was like metformin or some sort of, maybe a sulfonylurea of some sort. Take a pill a day, 2 pills a day, whatever the case is. It'll get you until you get back home. So fast forward a few days, finished vacation, and actually during that time, I had started developing a new symptom, which was blurred vision. I hadn't had that before, and that was actually pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward, we get back to Connecticut, let's call it on a Saturday, and that Monday morning, I started my diabetes training at Connecticut Children's in Hartford.
Okay.
And that's where I got my initial education, my diagnoses, and it was at the time, I think, a 3 or 4 day outpatient education. And
Okay.
that it was a Monday, and I
Yeah.
remember giving my first my first injection that Monday.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty fast and furious,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like at the time I didn't really know anything else. I took it pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
and then the high school years hit. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that's a question on here, but I'm sure we'll get to it. So that was kind of my diagnosis,
Okay.
and how it came to be.
Let me just ask, were there any family members with type 1 diabetes or any
Zero,
history of anything like
zero.
that? So this
No,
is just very, very new for everybody.
yeah, it was
Mm-hmm.
very new. I mean, I obviously being in the medical field, I go back and I thought it could have been this, it could have been that. I had strep a lot growing up, and I had ear infections a lot. So you think about this, the autoimmune component to it,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And maybe being sick here or there could have, just been a virus
Mm-hmm.
that maybe attacked my pancreas. And then I thought, okay, well, I lost all this weight,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe it was because of the rapid weight loss. Maybe it was that. So of course, in my head, I'm like, well, is this something I could have prevented? Was it going to happen anyways? And you always play that, that in your head, like,
Sure.
was it something I did? Could I have done something differently? Um, but it is what it is.
Let's share your background because and if having type 1 diabetes was the reason that you chose the career path that you chose, just a little bit about also the fact that you are a nurse,
Yeah.
because everyone's probably, all our audiences in the WellBetic community are probably wondering, well, why does he keep referring to all these different little words that we
Yeah.
don't know?
Sure. The little medical terms. I just learned them on the way over here. So I am a nurse. I did open heart cardiology for years. I initially was going to be a vet, wanted to be a veterinarian, and was working for a vet hospital in Rocky Hill for a while. I was like, I'm going to be a vet. Loved animals, still do to this
Wonderful.
day. And then I think it was a lot of my diagnosis had a lot to do with my career path change,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
ended up going to school for nursing down in Florida, and yeah, that was my a lot of it I do attribute to being diagnosed with diabetes, because I was like, well, I can help animals or I can help people, or I can, I understand it more now, so I have more of a draw to
Sure.
to helping
Sure.
people. I think a lot of people who go into the medical field have some sort, whether it's a family member themselves or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a relative of some sort. I think a lot of the draw to the medical field is because of things that we've been through ourselves or seen or been a part of.
And what tools from the education that you received early on did you feel were the most helpful for you? And did you get more education in the future,
Mm,
ongoing?
mm. That's a good question. Thinking back of the things that they taught me, and this is back in the early to mid 90s, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
call it 93, 94, around that time. I mean, we didn't have the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have the
Right,
stuff we have
right.
now at our fingertips. We
Sure,
didn't have apps
sure.
to go on and see if this food is healthy, right? We didn't have any of this stuff.
CGM
A CGM was
technologies.
not even
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
radar.
yeah.
So I think during that time, a lot of it was just what we've known historically, right? We used historical data, and we used, well, this is healthy. And I think historically, even go back maybe more like 30, 40, 50 years, it was like, well, if you have diabetes, you can't eat sugar. Not, it's just off the table, can't have sugar. They didn't really talk about, things like sweet potatoes or things that have, that are lower glycemic may have just as many carbohydrates as something else, but if it's sugar, can't have it. So I think I was still on the tail end of that type of mentality,
Mhm.
and it was like only a few carbs. It's very carb counting heavy, which I still count carbs,
Sure,
but it
sure.
was like very strict,
Mhm.
like 15 or 20,
Mhm.
carbs per meal or per se. And I think a lot of it was really because thinking now and knowing what I know in the medical field, as do you,
Mhm.
I think it was, well, that you can only have those things in those quantities because the insulins that we had, right? The insulins that we
Correct.
had weren't the analog insulins and didn't have the flexibility that we have now.
That we
So
have
you're
today.
basically eating
Absolutely.
to the treatment plan, right? The
Correct.
treatment plan was 3 types of insulins on the market,
Correct.
right? So you can only eat based on what we know that insulin can do. Unless you
Correct.
want to take 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 shots a day, it wasn't that way. There weren't even long acting basal insulins at the time, right?
Right,
I think
right.
I was using,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Ultralente 70
Yeah.
30 and in a regular and regular and NPH,
Right.
right? I mean,
Sure.
those
Sure.
medications are like distant memories now. You see them here and
Mhm.
there, you're like, oh, NPH insulin.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
now it's either Lantus or
Right,
a
because
long acting.
now those older generation insulins are really used only if someone is got some cost
Right,
um, financial
right,
restraints
exactly,
going on.
exactly, right.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, the teachings on diet was really to be like secondary to what medications were out there that would help. So
Right.
if yeah. So
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. The next question is really about where do how do you feel diabetes education has gone from when you started at 12, 13 to now
mm,
in terms of what we have available out there, in terms of the importance of
mhm,
people that are getting newly diagnosed, particularly prediabetes, for
mhm,
example, because there are many, many, many individuals out there that have prediabetes, and many of them don't even know they have it.
mhm,
And so education is really key. It's really important, which is really the reason for my developing WellBetic, because
mhm.
I wanted to be able to provide virtual diabetes education so that I could really reach many, many
Right.
people, not just people in my home state.
Yeah. I'll take that into like two parts. I'll kind of talk about what it
Mm-hmm.
was like when I was diagnosed as far as the education piece behind food,
Right,
right? And
right,
it was limited.
sure.
It's like you can have this, and this. Sometimes, rarely, you can have this and this. So I think there was a more of um, they frowned upon the types of foods that now are like maybe a little bit more accepting,
Mm-hmm.
right? So back then it was like, well, you can't have all these things, and you have to be very strict. And I'm still pretty strict, but I
Right,
think there's so many things out there. I say now it's really about choosing the right foods and quantity, right?
correct.
You can
Right.
have
Portions,
portions, right? You can have
correct.
something sweet. You can have ice cream. You can have anything that anyone without diabetes can
Mm-hmm.
have, right? But the quantity should be the same if you have diabetes or not, right? It's just overall healthy habits and healthy choices, right? It doesn't really matter, what the disease process is.
Mm-hmm.
It's about just making good choices. And I don't think I would have been given that information if I hadn't had, a good diabetes educator, right? I
Absolutely.
think so many people are like, oh, it's diabetes educator. It's just for my insurance. I have to do it. But I think if people actually think about it, there's so much value there. Like
There is.
someone who's gone to school for this, right? Dietetics and the understanding of good food choices and how to pair it with a disease state. I think there's so much value in that
Mm-hmm.
that that patients don't really understand,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that again, that's kind of parlays over into what you're doing here and just trying to provide the awareness, right? Because the
Absolutely.
awareness just isn't there. It's like, oh, I have
Yeah.
to see my diabetes
Yeah.
educator, and people are half listening, and they get the fake banana and the fake oatmeal and the fake this and that. And I go, okay, it's not
Absolutely.
real.
Yeah,
And
sure,
they take that not
sure.
real mentality, and it's like that was all just I had to do it for my insurance, and
Correct,
now I'm just going to go back to
correct.
eating.
Or I had to do it
And
because my medical provider said I had to do it.
yes,
Yeah,
and now it's like
because you
okay,
have
let's
to be
get two number
ready.
threes now,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right, right.
from the fast food.
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
I think
absolutely.
there's a lot of value in that, and I think again because I'm in the medical field, I have more understanding, just your
Sure,
knowledge
sure,
of what's
sure.
out there and resources, but so many people don't, right? So many people
That is
don't,
correct.
and I feel like it's such a necessary thing um, that's so underutilized,
Hmm.
right? So,
Absolutely, absolutely. There are three E's in diabetes mellitus,
mm,
and those E's are for education, eating, and exercise.
mm-hmm,
And I truly believe that trio of um, important pieces or important tools that you need in your toolkit are
mm,
what is going to take you on a journey living with diabetes and being able to live your best life,
yeah,
because that's really
absolutely,
important, and that's really the goal. You
mm-hmm,
want to be able to live with your diabetes in a way where you feel like you're just like everyone else, which just some with a little bit of uniqueness to you.
mm,
Yeah,
mm.
which is important.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point there about just being like everyone else. And I went through a period of time in my senior year of high school, right? And that was where my diabetes kind of digressed a little bit.
Hmm.
And but that was all really in my head, right?
Hmm.
I had put it there and I had acted upon it.
Right.
And that was, I just want to be like everyone else. I want to eat what all my friends are eating.
Hmm.
I don't want to have a time frame. I was kind of strict, like, you know, breakfast is at 8 or 7, whatever, right? And then lunch is at 12. And I have to have these many. I have to have this,
Sure,
this
sure.
type of food from this food group and that food group, and it's very well balanced. And it almost puts too much pressure, especially as someone who's a teenager. It puts a lot of pressure.
I
So you think
agree.
about that. You're a teenager getting all this pressure, but think about people in society now,
Hmm.
right? Who have the same pressure, and just in the general population, right? And they're hearing it from Instagram, and then their friends, and they're reading things. And there's so much. We have information overload, and then
Correct.
what do you believe, and what do you listen to, and what do you follow? And most people are
Hmm.
like, I'm just going to do what I've always done, and they fall back into those grooves, right?
Right.
They try to make some adjustments. They see a nutritionist, whatever the case is, and then they're like, it's too overwhelming. I'm being pulled in too many different directions. So how do we get all that information, knowledge, and give patients what they need,
Mhm.
right? And that's what we do, right? That's what we do with our
Correct.
jobs,
Yeah,
and
that's what we
and
do
and,
in our
and help
roles.
people. Yeah. So I
Absolutely.
think it's like I said, it's very underutilized, and I think there's needs to be more of a you know, more of a awareness, I would say, around good eating habits. And it isn't you don't have to have diabetes to have good eating habits.
Correct.
In my household, my wife and our daughter, I'm the only one with diabetes. We all eat the same
Correct.
way, right? We eat the
Exactly.
same healthy choices. I mean, no one's. You ask my wife and daughter, they're not like, oh my gosh, we were just eating like rice cakes and peanut butter.
Right.
No, there's like whatever is in our house is in
Absolutely.
everyone else's home, but it's just the portion and the right time and the right foods and the right
Correct. And the
activity,
sequence.
right? You
The
said the three
sequence.
E's, right? In the
The three
sequence,
E's. Yeah.
the
The
exercise
sequence.
and the education and stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
it's important.
And with type 1 in particular, because you can quickly go way up and be in the 400s
Mm-hmm.
or higher, and
Mm-hmm.
you can quickly come way down really
Mm-hmm.
quickly. So I want you to talk a little bit about rescue glucagon,
Mm.
because I think that that is something that is critical to everyone who is using insulin, whether you're type 1 or type 2, to manage your diabetes,
Yeah.
or someone who is on oral medications that could potentially drop them really low, drop their
Mm-hmm.
blood sugars really low.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really feel that I don't feel there's the utilization of rescue glucagon that there needs to be. And it is a lifesaver
Mm.
in a sense. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that, because you're a big guru when it comes to rescue glucagon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was right, so I have a new role now. So I
Yes,
don't do the
that's
rescue
true.
glucagon
That's
anymore.
true. You have a new
Um,
role.
but I think rescue glucagon in whatever form, right?
Hmm.
That the patient chooses.
Correct.
Everyone should have it, right? Whether
Hmm.
you want to choose, a nasal, a sub Q, an IM, right, for the IM injections that are still around and floating around here and there. Whatever you choose, I think the most important thing is that you have one.
Absolutely.
Right. And
Absolutely.
I think, I'll give you some statistics, right? So currently, right now in the US, there's about 15 million or so Americans using insulin or sulfonylureas, right? And what, if I had to ask you, what percentage, you probably know the answer already, but what percentage of that 15 million do you think, have a rescue?
I would say it's pretty low.
Pretty low. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
less than 5%.
I was
Right.
going to say 8. I was
Right.
close.
It's about 5% or less.
Yes.
So that's pretty amazing, right?
It's
5.5,
scary.
3.5 to 5.5,
It is
whatever the number
scary.
looks like.
Yes.
It's pretty
Yes.
scary. So we think about so many patients. Let's say there's a million. Let's just call it a million, round number. Of a million people have a rescue, there's about 14 million without. Right. So these are people walking around with no safety net. Right. So
Absolutely.
I've always had something. I've always been pretty good about carrying it with me. A couple of these are mine.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I brought that in for a demonstration in the Gvoke sub Q.
Yeah.
And you think about, we go back to the 1960s, right, when glucagon was then available to people in a reconstitution form. That's all we had, but it was amazing. That's all we had. Fast forward 60, 70 years, there's so many new amazing things on the market now
that are so quick.
Less than 15, 20 minutes.
Correct.
Full recovery.
Yes.
Not 500, 600 rise in your glucose. I mean, these are like micro doses almost, the amounts that we have in small 1 milligram, 2, 3, 4 milligram.
And the best part
dosages.
that you're going to feel so much better, because the low blood sugar is a horrible feeling.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah.
It's it's not fun. So my biggest piece of advice is just to have something.
Absolutely.
If you choose something and that's what you like, stick with it. Have it. Make sure you don't have expired glucagon. But I think it's super important. Not just for patients to have the conversation with the providers, but just for the providers to have that and understand that education and make sure that their patients have something.
Absolutely.
Right?
And also for patients to be their own advocates. If you are using insulin or you're using sulfonylureas or other medications for diabetes that can cause a severe low blood sugar, then ask your provider about rescue glucagon. Know the choices that are out there. And obviously, a lot of things are dictated by your insurance companies, but don't be afraid to be an advocate for yourself and say, I would like to use, for example, the EpiPen version of rescue glucagon, or I'd like to use the powder. You have a say in it. And it's important for you to be knowledgeable and go in there and say, this is what I really want, and get what you want. And because it's part of you living your life in a very safe manner, especially living with diabetes.
Well, you go to the grocery store and you pick out the food you want.
Correct.
Right?
You do.
So this is your health. You should be able to pick out the medication and the rescue products that you want, right?
Yeah, your health is a priority.
And I think just having a conversation, the candid conversation with your providers is important. And I think a lot of times patients feel like, oh, my doctor wants this. I'm going to do this.
Correct.
And that's what they want, right? Well, that's not what I want.
Correct.
Right? So I think just, being a little bit more open and outspoken. I feel like in the years that I've been doing pumps and education and open heart, I feel like now it's a society we live in too. People are a little bit more outspoken about what they want. But there still are people who don't, and it's important to speak up.
That's important. I'm so glad you joined us today, Nathan.
This was great. This was fun.
One last piece of advice that I would love for you to share, sort of like suggestion or words that you live by for our WellBetic community and audience that's listening or watching, that you think is really important for those that are living with diabetes, particularly our type 1s, because as we know, there are millions and millions of people in the U.S. that are living with diabetes, but only 10% of those have type 1 diabetes. So it's not as prevalent as type 2. And so I really want to make an effort to really speak to them with your presence here.
There's so many things I can say to this. I'll say a few.
Okay, thank you.
I'll say one. Um, don't beat yourself up, right? This you could eat the same. We say this all the time. You can eat the same
Yes,
thing every day. You can exercise at the same time every day.
yes,
Eat at the exact same time, and your blood sugars are going to be totally different the next day. There's
correct.
so many things that don't be too hard on yourself. I guess is where I wanted to go with that one.
Hmm.
Give yourself some grace. Give yourself credit. We're going to have days that we're like, I don't know what the hell happened today. It didn't make any sense because I did the same thing yesterday and I had great numbers. Um, don't get fixated on an A1C either. I'll say that.
Yes.
Think more about like time and range, right? Because that's the overall better picture of overall good control.
And what's
And
happening to the blood sugar for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I like that.
And I always say, diabetes is a very difficult disease to manage,
Hmm.
and an even more difficult to manage well,
Hmm.
right? So it's you can manage it, but to manage it well is like the next step. And I always challenge people to get to the next step,
Hmm.
right? Because we can all do everything status quo, but like when I was first diagnosed, I remember them saying diabetes is like the silent killer. I'm like, wow, what the hell does that mean? Silent killer? I feel like I'm doing okay. It's like
It
all those.
doesn't have to be, especially
It
now.
doesn't have to be, right? And I think you don't think about all the little microvasculature and vascular things that are happening, but give yourself grace, take each day at a time,
Absolutely.
um, and you know things will, if you're making the right choices, things will work out. Make sure you're having these candid conversations with your provider and your diabetes educator, and
Hmm.
and 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 do research. Like there's so much out there.
So much out
There's
there.
too much out there, to be
Yeah,
honest with you. It's way
yeah,
too much.
yeah.
But spend time, do some, educate yourselves, read, learn. This is our disease, right?
Correct.
So if you want to learn more about it, you can't, stick your head in the sand and expect someone else to make those decisions for you, because it won't happen.
Absolutely.
So
And
I
it
think
should
your best advocate is yourself.
absolutely be your best advocate and sort of have a partnership with your
Mm.
medical provider and your
Mm-hmm.
diabetes
Mm-hmm.
educator, because that's really the two most important people
Yeah.
on your team.
And for teens, I'll give teens, because we have a 10-year-old and she's going to be a teen before I know it. Um, for teens, have a buddy, have a
Hmm.
friend that you can talk to
I
who
agree.
would know what to do and how to use, these products,
Absolutely.
if something happened.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't take much to have a severe low. And I've had friends over the year. I had a friend in college die, passed out
Yes.
in his room. No one was
Yes.
around.
And
He
it
died in
doesn't
his
have to
room.
happen. Correct.
Doesn't have to happen.
Right. Right.
It's the more people die of low blood sugar than in car accidents in a
Hmm.
year, right? So, those are pretty scary statistics that can all be prevented, right, with the modern technology and medication we have. So,
Absolutely.
use it. It's out there.
Absolutely.
I always say this too. Diabetes we've had more advances in diabetes in the last 10 years than we've had in the previous 50, right? So
I agree.
last 10 years, I mean, for pumps, for CGMs, for medication, medication alone is pretty advanced in the things we have. So,
I totally
utilize
agree
those.
because I've been in diabetes education for 25 years, and it really has changed in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in my opinion, in a great way.
Yeah,
So we
absolutely.
are exactly where we want to be, and I think we're going to go a lot further.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
thank you so much
Yeah, my
for
pleasure.
joining us and sharing your story with us.
This was great.
Yes,
We'll do
it
a round
was.
two at
I
some
know
point.
we have to. We absolutely have to. And to our WellBetic family and community out there that's been patiently listening to us and watching us on our channel, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and also join us and join our WellBetic community actually at wellbetic.com/coming-soon. We'd love to have you join us. We're signing off for now. Thank you, and we'll see you next time for WellBetic Wellness Suites. Take care.